Welcome to Introduction to Prospect Research Finding Grants from the Forefront Library. My name is Zoe McGarrick. I am the Manager of Knowledge Services, and I'm also a librarian here. And I will be walking you through some information about finding grants and the prospect research tools that we have here in the library. A lot of times when we begin talking about who we are, people are a little bit confused. What is Forefront and who are we? WeForFrank is a statewide membership organization that brings nonprofits, grant makers, and allies all together in one space for education and networking. A lot of states have individual organizations for nonprofits or a statewide organization for funders, but we think that it makes more sense to bring everybody together to one table, and hopefully we can make bigger and better change that way in this sector. At Forefront, we have a library, which is unique and actually very special. The type of library we are is also a special library, and I've worked in special libraries most of my career, but I do think this library is the most special, and that our collection is very narrow in that it serves the nonprofit sector and philanthropy, but it's very deep. So we have a lot of resources that can be a challenge to find other places. One of the other things that we do through the library is we are a funding information network partner for Foundation Center, now Candid. And what that means is that we provide access to the main database, Foundation Directory Online, for free to the public by appointment, Monday through Friday. So our appointment schedule can change a little bit, but you can find those available appointments at library.myforefront.org as soon as they open up. For the rest of this year, we will get those posted. And another thing that I like to recommend at this point when people are beginning prospect research, or even if you've been doing it for a while, is grantspace.org. It's a great website made by Candid, Foundation Center, and it has tons of free webinars and self-paced learning and lots of free content, a really expanded knowledge base to learn about all aspects of the sector, and it has sample documents. A while ago, Foundation Center used to put out a book called The Grant Seeker's Guide to Winning Proposals, and it had examples of LOIs and proposals that were successful. They've migrated a lot of that content to grantspace.org. It is a free website. You'll just have to make a free account within it, but once you do that, you'll be able to access those sample budgets, sample proposals from anywhere, which is great because you'll be able to, it's always nice to be able to benchmark yourself against something else, really no matter how long you've been doing it. And especially if it's the first time that you've done something, it can be very helpful to look at another one. And we have a bunch of other prospect research databases that we will go through, and those are also available through the library by appointment. So basically, we're providing a suite of resources to the public for certain hours to help you along with your prospect research. Databases are the main way that a lot of things work nowadays. You can take a look at our database list here. It looks just like this at library.myforefront.org, and you can scroll on through it. There are about 70 some databases in the list, and the vast majority of them are free and available to anyone from anywhere. You don't need to be in the library to use it. You don't need to sign in. They're just things that we've found that may be helpful. Now, our prospect research databases, you do need to be in the library to use. So those would be things that you would make an appointment and come on down and take a look at. So what exactly do we have? Well, this is our main list of prospect research tools, and I'm actually going to start from the bottom up. We have EBSCO databases. EBSCO is a vendor that collects journals and magazines and newspapers. So they're often, you'll often find them they have EBSCO collections in public libraries and in academic libraries. Ours are definitely nonprofit and business focused. We also have a large selection of nonprofit and business ebooks. Then coming up the chain here, NOSA is a database that is tricky to use from a prospect research angle, but can be very helpful to fill out profiles on individuals and is really useful for corporate giving. It is a database of gifts that have been reported out. So basically, you aren't going to get very much information, but it can be very helpful, especially for corporate giving and some more difficult to dig into organizations to find out who they've given to find out if they may be a good donor for you. Another way that it can work well is with local giving. And by that, I mean law offices, car lots, restaurants that are charitable and do make gifts that are acknowledged by nonprofits, but obviously don't have any sort of foundation set up. NOSA can allow you to look up some of those gifts that have been thanked for to find out if you are even within the wheelhouse of the giving of that organization or their interest. We have a professional level membership to GuideStar through the library. And what that does is it allows you to print profiles, so you can download their entire GuideStar profile, which can be helpful. And you can also make lists. So you can make lists of all of the nonprofits in a certain zip code range, or in a certain area, or of a certain tax-exempt entity type. So you can get an idea of the depth in your area. If you're working in education, you can see all of the education-related nonprofits near you to maybe look for partnerships, opportunities for collaboration, or even just see how many other fish are there with you in the pond. Catholic Funding Guide is a really unique database in that it is a database of funders that have supported faith-based work. Now, I like to recommend it to everyone, and it's actually, I feel like it's a little secret that we have in the library, because one of the things that it seems to hold a lot of information on that other databases don't is smaller family foundations. Now, you're not going to get a lot of information out of Catholic Funding Guide, but you may get a name and a phone number, and that's really valuable for, especially for smaller family foundations, because the vast majority of them have no web presence whatsoever, so you wouldn't even know they existed, unless obviously they were looking to donate to you or you had a relationship with them. But Catholic Funding Guide may be a way to get at some of that information of how to contact them. And each of the organizations included has a profile of things they're interested in supporting. And obviously, if they're only interested in supporting faith-based work, they're very clear about it. But a lot of them have many other interests and may be applicable to other projects as well. And then Foundation Directory Online is our main database for foundation prospect research, in that it is a database of grant makers. And we can, at the end of this, I'm going to do a quick demo so you can take a look at how it works. But basically what you'll find at the end is a list of grant makers that are either interested in funding in the area in which you work or have previously funded in that area. So you can have an idea and get a more coned-in list together of funders that may be good prospects to match up with the work you're trying to do. So other places to look for prospect research. So there's a lot of places in our communities where you can do some prospect research work that aren't the Forefront Library, that I think kind of get overshadowed. So public libraries. Well, a lot of public libraries are funding information network partners. And so they offer Candid's resources for free for a period of time during the week. In our area, Barrington Public, Schaumburg Public, College of DuPage, they are all funding information network partners. So there are other places that you can go to use the resources if they're more convenient for you. I would just definitely reach out to them first to find out what their hours are, if there's any special use restrictions, just so you understand how they provide that access. Public libraries also have a more robust collection of business and newspaper databases, as well as directories and public records that can be helpful when you're trying to create profiles on different foundations or on individuals. And one of the big benefits of public libraries is that they allow remote access sometimes, depending on your public library system. So you may be able to do a lot of this research from the comfort of your home. I will mention at this point that if you are a member of Forefront, since we are a membership organization, the benefits are a little bit different for members and the public. If you are a member organization, you can do remote prospect research through the library staff. So Sarah and you would email us your requests to look things up in Foundation Directory Online, to do wealth profiles. There's a whole suite of things that we can provide, and we would send you back those results. Members do not have remote access with a password and a login to anything but our newspaper and journal collections, but we can do all that remote research for you. So it's a little bit of an added bonus that not only do you get it remotely from sitting at your desk, but you also don't have to do that research. So that is a member benefit. Academic libraries are pretty unique. So I know I mentioned College of DuPage as being a potential prospect research database site. There are also other benefits. So a lot of times if you live within the district or the area of a community college, they may have community borrower privileges. So you may get access to more things just by living in the area. And a lot of academic institutions make their libraries available to the public that lives around them or that uses them on a limited basis. So you could look into that. They also have expanded business and newspaper databases, academic databases, and I would definitely recommend checking out any alumni relationships that you may have and seeing what that means in terms of library access. Sometimes alums have access that's equal to current students. So you may be able to get your hands on a lot of databases and research tools that you wouldn't otherwise. So now we're going to talk about finding grants. And we're going to talk about kind of the steps before the digging into the database of prospect research and getting into the mindset of thinking of what funders may be best for us and how we're going to fund the programs we're looking to fund. So we're going to talk about the 10 most important things you need to know about finding grants. And I think some of these are going to be about finding grants, but they're also going to be about your organization. So we're going to kind of dig deep, learn a little bit more about thinking about ourselves as an organization, and also some tools to use when you're looking for a match between your organization and a potential funder. You can't survive on grants alone. Funders like to see a diversified fundraising plan. So thinking about other ways to get funding, right? So this chart is one of my favorites, and I show it to almost everybody that comes into the library because it underscores a misconception that I think exists in the sector in large part. And that misconception is that most of the funding in the nonprofit sector comes from foundations. And that's just not true. If you look at this chart here, 68% of funding comes from people giving to organizations that they're connected with, or people giving to organizations that they care about. It's person to person. Foundations, bequests, and corporations, make up the rest of that pie. But just thinking about, depending on the project you're looking to fund or the status of your current fundraising circumstance, maybe stewarding individual donors is a very valuable spending of time. Foundations are not always the perfect funding match for every project and every program. Just to remember how important it is to steward those individual donors and remain connected to that pipeline. Not all foundations are alike. So what does that mean? Well, there are three main types of private foundations. And I think private foundations are what a lot of us think of when we think about what foundation means. So independent, private, and family, right? That would be like the Ford Foundation or the any family foundation you can think of. The Donnelly Foundation, started by a person with a person's name. And then there's company-sponsored foundations. And company-sponsored foundations are unique in that they are started by an organization, but they exist completely separate from it. So a company-sponsored foundation has its own board, it has its own budget, it has its own people working on it. And there are also operating foundations. And operating foundations are often started by an organization to fund a particular purpose or for a particular purpose. And hospitals often have operating foundations. The thing that links all three of these is they need to file a 990 form with the government to show who they've given money to. So that's one way that you can find out if you match up with their giving priorities, if they've given to organizations that are similar to yours. And Foundation Directory Online spends a lot of time making it easier than that. And so you aren't digging through pages and pages of 990 forms trying to make these connections. So that'll be one of the benefits that we'll see when we do the demo. Foundations must give money away. So that's one of the things I think that contributes to the misconception that most of the funding in the sector comes from foundations. Foundations must give about 5% of the previous 5 years assets away. And so they do have a vested interest in giving money away. And we have had people come into the library to look up GuideStar profiles of organizations that work in areas that they're interested in funding to give money away at the end of the year when they haven't spent down enough of it. So just a little plug here to make sure that your GuideStar profile is updated and active, because you never know who's looking for it. So there's a few other types of grant makers. So there's direct corporate giving programs, and those are what you will find on the website of a company under the We Give Back tab, where you see a bunch of employees all wearing the same t-shirt, heading out to do a bunch of volunteer work or give a bunch of in-kind gifts to organizations. Direct corporate giving programs are interesting in that they're also operated by a company, similar to company-sponsored foundations, but they're operated completely within the company. They have the same board, they have the same budget, and so they do not need to report out who they give to. So the big question there is, how do you get at that information? How do you find out who they're interested in giving to? Some are becoming more transparent. Walmart is doing kind of a better job at this point at that. They're trying to have more interest information, and they're trying to make it, from what I can tell, a little bit more transparent. But NOSA is a database that can help there sometimes, because just because they haven't reported out who they gave to doesn't mean they haven't been thanked. And so you could look them up in NOSA and maybe get an idea at least of the areas that they're interested in giving in. If it seems like all of their gifts are to pediatric medical causes and you are working with sports, maybe that's not the best fit, and maybe you should move to a different prospect, but you never know. So NOSA can be a way to get at a piece of that puzzle. There are also grant-making public charities, and grant-making public charities, often like a United Way or an organization similar to that, are unique in that they usually engage in both. They grant seek and they grant make. So they are both soliciting funds and granting funds out. They do have to file a 990 and report out who they have given money to. So when you think about funder motivations, one of the things that I think about is, what kind of funder are you looking for? And what kind of funders do you already have? So this kind of underscores that idea of having a diversified fundraising pie. Funders don't want to feel like they're the only one in the room. And they want the work to go on, right? So if you think about a relationship with a funder or a potential funder, you're kind of their boots on the ground, right? There, you both have you both see the same problems in the world, and you want to make it better. And so they're funding you to do the actual work to make that better because they believe in your methods and they believe in what you do. But different organizations kind of have different strings attached, if you will, about why they give and what motivates them. So private foundations usually want to fulfill philanthropic goals and interests while supporting a variety of issues through an objective process. Private foundations are often started with a mission in mind, right? A person of means will start a foundation to support things that matter to them or to try to ameliorate problems that they see. That can be neighborhood-based, that can be subject-based, but just to think about, that's usually where the connection comes in with private foundations. Corporations and corporate giving tend to focus more on branding, visibility, corporate social responsibility. Again, they may have areas that they give in and areas of interest, but they also may go for things that can provide them with a little bit more visibility. Maybe oftentimes that's why they may support larger organizations, because they can get their name out there. Because when you're looking at grant funding and when you're looking to get grants from foundations or corporations, it's a business relationship, right? It's a give-get. They want to give you the funds to get the change in the world or to get the branding and the visibility. There is a give and take there that has to be respected and discussed. Grant-making public charities are normally organized to make change and impact in different communities or regions. United Way of Fox Valley, different organizations that are come together to support a particular community or an issue area. Grant writing is never about the need of your organization. So what this slide is getting at is kind of positioning yourself and thinking about, when you're going to approach a funder, what are you going to talk about? And the thing that you both are coming together on, the nonprofit and the funder, is the change that needs to happen in the world. And so it's not about the new roof that you need, unfortunately, or the staff that you need to pay. It's about how supporting your organization will allow you to make more change and to do more and to do better, or to solve a problem that you and the funder agree is a problem. It's about the needs in the world that you're looking to solve, not about your direct physical personal needs there. And one of the ways that when funders look at applications, they think about credibility, right? And they think about, is this organization going to actually be able to do the work that they're presenting? And I think sometimes we all have the dream of, what would I do if $1 million fell in my lap and all the change you could make and all that. But when you actually think about what that looks like, if you've got $1 million grant and you're a 4-person shop, could you really manage that money? Because also with grant money, the larger the amount, usually the more restrictions there are on it, and usually the more you have to report on it. And thinking about what that means within your organization. Do you have the capability to actually manage that large of a gift? And a lot of organizations, unfortunately, don't. You'd have to hire more people. You'd have to expand very rapidly. And that's not always the best way to do things. Sometimes it is, definitely. But for most of us, I'm not sure that getting a grant of like 4 times our annual budget is really the best use of anyone's money there. Now, this is just an aside, thinking about maybe collaboration and cooperation. This could be a way where that may work. Maybe if you're a group of after-school programs, if you combine together and you're all working in the same geographic area, you could come together to apply for a larger grant, and maybe you could make a ton more change that way. Think about all the change you could make if you brought together the strengths of 4 or 5 organizations and you were able to get a very large grant. Not only would you be able to prove your credibility to manage that much money, but you'd also be able to provide so much more benefit for the communities and for the funder that's supporting it. So some things that speak to credibility. Are you a legal nonprofit? So in order to get foundation funds, the vast majority of them require you to have 501c3 designation. If you don't, and you're someone that's interested in doing some programming in the community and you're looking to get foundation funds, a way to do that would be to get a fiscal sponsor or a fiscal agent. Grantspace.org definitely has some great resources around that if you want to learn more about what that means. But basically then you would be working with an established 501c3 organization. The grants would be made to them and they would pass through to you. Usually there are fees associated with that relationship, but also there are different things you may get from your fiscal sponsor. Some fiscal sponsors end up doing more back-end support, accounting, kind of administration for the program holder. It just kind of depends. But usually you do need to be, 99% of the time, you do need to be a legal nonprofit in order to receive grant funds and to apply. Do you have a compelling mission that is compatible with the funder's focus area? Again, the whole prospect research process is about a match. It's about looking for a match between a funder that sees the same issues in the world and you who's going to get rid of them. So the better and the stronger you can make that match and find that match, the more likely it is that you're going to get funded. Do you have strong leadership? So when funders, most funders get way more applications than they can fund, and they're looking for organizations that will be around next year and that can get the work done and will be able to deliver on the promises that they're making in the proposal. So strong leadership is important, making sure that the people that you have in leadership positions are good stewards of your organization and will be good stewards of any potential grant funds. Do you provide high quality programs that meet a real need in the community? I think most people off the bat would say, yes, of course we do. And I'm sure everybody does. But one of the things to think about when you're looking for grant funding is, from foundations especially, is, so if you find a funder and they're interested in your area, say after school programs that you work in, they probably support a bunch of other after school programs. Why should they support yours? Why should they add you in? How are you different? What makes you stand out in your community and in the work that you do? And that, I think the real need is kind of emphasized there. We all know that there are a lot of organizations doing after school programs, let's say in Chicago. But why is what you do different? What do you bring to the table that would make that funder say, wow, we've never thought of doing it that way? Or we've always wanted to do a biking program and we haven't. Just to think about the things that make your organization stand out, or anything that you can provide, especially if the funder is already deeply invested in your area of work. Just why a partnership with you would make their connections to that work stronger. Do you have a strong organizational and financial infrastructure? And this gets back to what I was saying about, can you support the amount of money you're looking for? Do you have the ability to manage the funds that you're asking for and produce the programs or produce the outcomes that you say you will in the application? So just to make sure that that is reflected in your budget and in any other documents that you submit, that you can do it, and that you will make the best use of all of that. Do your homework first. So the whole prospect research process is about homework, right? It's about figuring out what is the best funder and what that means, and finding out more things about them. But homework also makes us more confident. The more you know about the funder, the more you know about previous projects they've supported, the more confident you can be when you find that match in your proposal and in what you're setting out to do. And I think that confidence radiates through the whole situation. The more confident you are in that match, and like, this funder would be great for us. They're definitely keyed into the same issues that we are, and you'll be much more confident when speaking about it. And so making sure you do all of this pre-research to make sure that the matches that you find are strong, it can do nothing but benefit you. The one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. So what this slide is getting at is that we should, just like with resumes, right? If you're applying to a bunch of different jobs, we aren't just sending out one resume to everybody. You're going to tailor your resume to different jobs and different needs of different positions. And just like that, you're going to tailor your application to different grant makers, to the needs of that application. Right when I started at the library, I had a woman come in who had never really written grants before, and she got a lot of resources from the library. And then she called me a few months later, pretty peeved, and said that she hadn't gotten any grants out of all the work that she'd done. And she'd sent out 50 applications. It was crazy, wild amount of applications. And then digging a little bit deeper in it, I found out that she had sent the exact same application to all 50 organizations. And the likelihood of success there is low, right? We need to you want to emphasize the match between yourself and the organization. And you want to make sure that you're spending your time writing quality proposals for a targeted number of organizations, rather than just doing scattershot method where you're hoping something will stick. And that's where Foundation Directory Online is a little bit unique, in that what it finds you are grant makers, essentially grant maker profiles of organizations kind of to investigate that may be good fits. There are a lot of people contact the library. This is another misconception. A lot of people contact the library looking for grants that are available. And so basically then what you'd be looking for would be open RFPs, or requests for proposal, that grant makers share. But then you're kind of fitting yourself into the existing buckets, right? You're like, well, I guess I could do a program like that. We do a program that's sort of like that. So if they're looking to fund it, but really you should be thinking about who funds me best, who will meet us best, not necessarily what can I do to make myself fit in there. So it's kind of two different versions of looking at the prospect research process and looking at the grant seeking process. But I think that you'll be better off in the end if you stick behind your mission and really think deeply about what it is that you do, and really all the ways that you do what you do. I really recommend, especially when beginning prospect research, that organizations think about all the different angles they can be thought of and all the different things that they do, because there are ways to make yourself more attractive to a wider variety of funders if you may think about yourself in a little bit more compartmentalized way. A lot of nonprofits that I talk to in the library tend to have a very coned in idea of their mission. But maybe, maybe you are an organization that does after school programs, and that's your mission, right? You provide the highest quality after school programs. But when you really dig into it, you do programming with seniors and young people as one of the arms of what you do. Well, then you could maybe target some senior interested organizations with that program arm. Maybe thinking about just different arms of what you do and targeting specific funders for those specific areas may be a way to increase the amount of funders that you're able to reach, and maybe allow you to fund more projects. Or even think about one project being funded. So funders, again, I had said before that funders don't like to be the only one in the room. And what I meant by that is, if you're looking for $50,000, it may help to look for two $25,000 grants, or even five $10,000 grants. Because funders are more likely to give when they feel like the whole thing won't fall down if they pull out, or if they decide to not fund it, right? Because assuming that your match is good, they'd want to they can't fund everyone, but they would want your work to continue. Because assuming that, again, that the match is appropriate, you're doing something that affects something that they see as a big issue. And I think that also when you think about it, if you're funding a $50,000 program and you look for $5,000, $10,000 grants, if you only get 3 of those, you may be able to do some of the program, and make some of the change. Whereas if you were just looking for $50,000 grants, if you didn't get any, you wouldn't be able to do any of it. So just trying to think about that a little bit and thinking about, how to make what you're looking for more likely. To get the grant, you have to have the right match. So again, this is what I've been talking about, and this is the whole point of prospect research. Prospect research is researching prospects, right? It's doing some homework and doing some deep dives before you write these proposals to make sure that the match makes sense. And that just because someone told you that Joyce Foundation may be a good place to apply, are they really? Really making sure that you understand that connection and can speak confidently behind it. So some things to think about when you're looking for the right match. Who funds in my area of interest and the population that I serve? So thinking about that, making sure that the funder that you're looking at funds where you're working and may have served the population that you serve. Who funds in my geographic region, right? Again, some funders, only fund in Cook County, only fund Chicago. Some funders fund Illinois wide. Just taking a look, and I'll show you how to do that in Foundation Directory Online to get an idea of kind of where they're funding in the area and making sure that they do indeed fund where you're going to be working. And who will provide the support that I need? That speaks to, can this grant maker make the size grant, or do they make the size grant that I'm looking for? Some funders, like MacArthur, tend to make big grants. So if you're a small, just starting out organization, that may not be the best funder. But some funders make a lot of small grants. And if you're looking for a middle-sized grant, again, that may not be the best funder too. So there's some ways in Foundation Directory Online that we can look at that and we can see how to determine that and how to maybe be able to make a more confident approach of that connection. Ask for the right amount. So this is connected directly to that. So you want to make sure that your ask is reasonable for what you're doing, makes sense for your organization, and is within the bounds of the way that the foundation gives. As I just said, not every foundation makes big grants, and not every foundation tends to make a lot of tiny grants. So depending on what you're looking for, just make sure that it makes sense. Make sure that the amount that you're looking for is the right amount for both the foundation and for what you need. You don't need to know someone to get a grant, but it can help you get your foot in the door. I think we all know this. I think just by basic life, that obviously if you have connections, the likelihood of maybe getting the grant is higher. But, sometimes it doesn't have to be the executive director that or the president of the board. I had a woman come into the library once who was having trouble with an application, and they had been getting grant funds from this organization for a long time. And then all of a sudden they submitted and they weren't hearing anything back, just radio silence. She tried contacting them, couldn't get to anyone, felt like she was getting the runaround. And so she reached out to her board, and it turned out that someone's son or daughter on the board worked for this organization. Not in the foundation angle, in sales, like in a very lower level in a different part of the organization, but she was able to get a contact name through that person for someone better to contact at the foundation, and was able to get resolution to a problem. And what that underscored for me is that it doesn't always have to be the highest, most important person, but maybe there can be little problems that you can solve, or maybe someone could get you the right phone number or a different type of connection. So just to not really not discount any connections you may have, or any ways to work through your board to maybe make connections that you didn't even know you had. The proposal is typically not the first thing a foundation wants. So when you look at the profiles in Foundation Directory Online, and when you look on the websites of different foundations, you'll find that the proposal is they often don't want a full proposal right off, because that's a lot of reading for them, a lot of work for you, when they haven't really determined if what you're doing matches well with their current open program areas. So a lot of times they'll want an LOI, or a letter of interest. At first, kind of a condensed version of what you do, what you're looking to do, and to kind of ascertain early on if this could be a good fit. So if acceptable, try to make a telephone call as the first approach. A lot of foundations, both big and small, have program officers for different areas of their work, and oftentimes their contact information will be listed. So it can help to say, you know, hi, I'm calling from this organization. Here's what we're doing. Do you have a minute to just kind of determine if we may be a fit? Just to kind of make sure so you're not wasting your time or their time. And sometimes that can be really valuable. And know who you're talking to and why. So if you're calling, just, you know, make sure that you have the person's name, their title, understand why you're calling, maybe write a little script for yourself so that you can make sure to get all of your ideas out. Keep the conversation brief and to the point. This isn't the time to make the full pitch, but, you know, maybe a more elevator size version of the pitch. And of course, try to utilize any contacts if you have them. So just some key takeaways from this presentation, just some things to think about. You're going to want to prove that you are a credible nonprofit, right? So you want to prove that you have the infrastructure in place to handle whatever grant you may receive, that you are a 501c3 or that you have a fiscal sponsor. Just make sure all of your more legal and documentary paperwork is in order. You want to use prospect research to find the right fit, right? You want to make sure that the organizations that you're approaching are exactly right for you and are the right ones for your project and for your organization. Always focus on the funder's motivations and interests. Show what's in it for them. This is a business relationship, and you want to show how you will allow their interests to reach a broader audience, or to cause more change, or to continue in a better way. You want to connect what you do with what the funder is looking to do. You're working together. And be prepared. And homework and prospect research can definitely help with that. Know who you're approaching and why. Just make sure you're confident in your approach and that you are confident that the foundations that you're contacting will be good matches for your organization. So that is the end of this portion. I hope that it was helpful, and I hope that if there are any questions, please feel free to email us at the library or give us a call. And now I will go into a brief demo of Foundation Directory Online. So I wanted to start off at our library homepage, because this is where, if you came into the library, you'd be accessing Foundation Directory Online, and just to make sure you all know what it looks like and where it's at. So our library page is library.myforefront.org, and you would scroll through this list here of databases. It's alphabetical, and we'll get to Foundation Directory Online Professional. And anyone that has used it before, about 2 years ago, it changed interface rather significantly, so it may look very different. The first thing to know about it is that it's not, in its nature, a free type database. You can't just type in what you do and it spits out a list of grant makers. They tried to get around this when they did the redesign by allowing this natural language bar, where you could type in what you did, like ballet school in New York City, and it would turn it into its terms, because it has its own tree of taxonomy and of terms. I have found that it works better to go to advanced search and filters, and then a lot of what you're doing is filling in boxes, right? So the subject area, geographic focus, and population served obviously being the most popular. What you're doing, where you're doing it, and who you're doing it with or for. The first thing you'll notice when you start to look for subject areas is these little carrots. So every big term has a lot of little terms within it that you can pick. You can get as specific or as broad as you'd like. And then one thing to note, if we picked 2 terms, you get this match any and match all dropdown. Match any links your terms by or, and match all links your terms by and. And there are pluses and minuses to both approaches. If you're doing or for these 2 terms, museums and health, which are rather far apart often, you will not be able to tell from your grantmakers list who supports which subject. You'll have to parse that out yourself by reading through the profiles. So for that reason, I'm a big fan of single subject searching. If these were 2 areas that you worked in, I would recommend doing a museum search and a health search and manually looking for grant makers that fit both buckets. And match all, if we connected these by and, limits our results very far, because it has to find both terms on the same grant. So sometimes we can go from 60 results with or to 0 with and. So that can be tricky as well. So let's just leave museums up here. Geographic focus is where you're doing your work. So it can go down to the city level, out to the county, or out to state. You can start typing here. So let's do Chicago. And then population is an interesting box. When you start reading the profiles, you'll realize that funders tend to focus more on subject areas that they're interested in funding and not necessarily who exactly will be funded by them, because there are a few populations that funders won't fund. So I often use population kind of as my first limiter. If I get way too many results in the beginning, I often don't start with one just because I don't want to artificially limit my search. Now that said, if I was working very specifically with a population, like let's say veterans, I would sometimes do a population served search with a geographic focus and leave subject blank. Because in that case, I'd be more interested to see who was really coned in to fund that particular population, and that list may be valuable too. Organization name, if you were looking for a particular Grantmakers profile, you could put in their name there. Or recipient organization, an organization that is similar to yours, if you wanted to see who funds them. That can be valuable because maybe there are funders that you're missing. Maybe someone's funding them that isn't funding you. Or maybe there are funders that you have in common and you could collaborate. And maybe that would make the most sense. Location is the location of the grantmaker or recipient organization. And so sometimes people make these the same, Chicago and Chicago. And what that would give you is funders that were interested in funding in Chicago that were located in Chicago to kind of get at some hyper-local giving. You can also use it in conjunction with this box here, organization type, to make a list of grantmakers. If you wanted to look at all of the, if you wanted to look at all the community foundations in Illinois, you could take a look there, and that could help if that was part of your fundraising strategy. Who's who? If you had heard of someone serving on a board somewhere, you want to see if they were on other boards, what their connection to the sector looked like, you could try to put their name in there. Again, these profiles are updated annually, usually, sometimes a little bit more than that, but I doubt when a board changes or there are staffing changes made, that's the first thing that's updated. So I wouldn't count on it to be the most current list, and also common names can make looking through this kind of challenging. There is this second level of filters here, which you can use from the very beginning or you never have to use. Support strategy is the type of support you're looking for. If you were doing something really specific, like buying a building or doing renovations, sometimes it can be helpful to add these into your search or just do a search for a support strategy with a geographic focus to get coned into funders that are really interested in supporting in that particular way. Transaction type is the type of support you're looking for. If you're looking for cash grants, I normally leave it blank. But if you were looking for in-kind gifts, this is where you'd be able to make that type of modification. Organization type, again, the type of grant maker. Grant amount and year are my favorite too, because they start really small and a long time ago, and they can really get your search coned in. When you have a really big set of search results in the hundreds, each page is hundreds, if you had 800 results, the last few pages would be $25 matching gifts, $100 gifts, things that people often aren't looking for. So sometimes if you have a lot of results, it can be helpful to set a minimum grant amount, like $2,500 or whatever your minimum grant is you're looking for, just to be able to weed out things that wouldn't be applicable for comparison purposes. And then 2003 is a long time ago for giving priority. So I do like to bring that in usually as a way of refinement. Some searches are very small though, so you want to see everything possible. Keyword is just as tricky as it is anywhere else. It can be helpful, but it can also come up with nothing. So sometimes it can work. I don't usually recommend it. EIN, if you have that for an organization, you can enter it there and go right to their profile. You don't need to fill out any boxes, really just one and get started. I wouldn't recommend putting things in every box. That'll just clog up the works. So let's do this search and see what happens. So click search here. It's going to be a big one. 1,500 grant makers have made almost 14,000 grants to 146 organizations per these refinements, museums in Chicago since 2003. Wow, how do we take this search and cone it into something useful? Well, the first thing I would think about doing is maybe adding a population. Let's say we were only interested in programs that worked with adults. Let's say we were doing some programming for adults. Let's click search and see how that changes our results. Now we're down to 7. So this is the magic of populations. So we've obviously eliminated a lot of potential funders because there aren't many funders out there that wouldn't support adult programs. So let's take that one out. And let's think about other ways to limit. So I always remove federal funders. And the reason that I do that is because I really think that federal funding requires its own hat and its own focus. So it usually doesn't remove very many at all, but it's just something that I like to mention procedurally. So now what do? Well, what I think would be a good way to go would be maybe we should pick a type of organization. So maybe we want to see all of the public charities that have given to museums in Chicago. So let's see what happens if we do that. 59. So that's a great place to start. Like if we really wanted to start making appeals to public charities, this may be a good list to work with. So then how do we get from 59 to a list of profiles that people actually want to work with? No one wants to read 59, not even me. So I would probably set a minimum grant amount of around 2,500, assuming we're a smaller organization, and maybe cone this in to 2015 to allow some time for late filings. We really haven't done anything in 2020 yet, just to allow to see a more coned in, tighter picture of who's giving now. 53. Wow, we didn't lose very many. That's good news. A lot of giving by public charities to museums right now. So then what do? Well, let's look at this Grantmakers list. If we click View All, this gets us a list of, and we get two things happen when you click View All. You get access to the Exclude Grantmakers Not Accepting Applications button, which is a very important button. So the 53 you can think of as a landscape view of everybody that has funded, whether they're accepting applications, whether they're not, where they're at in that cycle, maybe places to build relationships, see if your board has any relationships. Whereas once we click Exclude, the tighter list that we'll be making would be for funding now, funding that we'd be able to access around next grant cycle. So let's click that and see what happens. Oops. Oh my. Okay. Just a little bit of a glitch there. Let's just go back. Let's try again. Let's see what happens. All right. So now we're down to 15. 15 is a great list. 15 is a really great place to be in terms of a number. This may not be the most fabulous list that we've ever created, but it's a great place to be as far as how many profiles to read and how many profiles to look at. So if we wanted to look at a profile, let's see what they look like. So if we click on this one, we open it here. All of the profiles follow the same general format. So this is the most recent 5 years of giving. So where they give subject-wise, where they give geographically, and how big their grants are. So if you were looking for a community and economic development grant in the 100,000 range, this probably isn't the funder for you. So you're able to tell that quickly from looking at these graphics. And if you click into the state, one of the cool things for anybody that's watching this that's not in Cook County is it will show you what counties they're funding in. So you'll be able to see here quickly how many grants they've made in what county in the past 5 years. So then it'll go through this list here in blue as you scroll, or you can click to any of these headings to get there sooner. Grants they've made that are applicable to our search, funding interests that they've reported. Again, a longer list of subjects, a very small list of populations. Any purpose and activity, and any program areas that they're supporting. So this is the first place to look for a match between what you do and what they do. Other funders to consider is produced by an algorithm within the program. So based on these results, maybe these funders would be applicable to you. How to apply, so any application information, where to download the form, anything that they want you to know, and any giving limitations that may be relevant to what they do versus what you do. If you wanted to look at their 990, you could click Go here and it would open in a new window. And any places to look for connections between your board, maybe you know some of these people, maybe your board does, communications they've been a part of, and obviously their contact information is here at the bottom. So let's say you wanted to take some of these records off of the computer and get them to yourself. You can just click these boxes here and use this envelope. You'll be emailing PDFs of these results to yourself. You will be able to send 10 at a time, full profile, so everything we went through, or 100 at a time, just this list view here. So depending on what you need. Another type of search that I just want to show before we are done here is one that's done often in the library, and it's looking for a grants list for a particular organization. So let's say someone had told you that Polk Brothers may be an organization that would be good to look at for funding. So you can type in their name here. We'll click on that. And if we search, it will pull up just their profile. So we click on Polk. Oops. Click on Polk here. And so what we'll be able to see, actually we'll head back to the search results real quick. What we'll be able to see here is that since 2003, they have made 7,000 grants. That's a lot. But let's say we're an arts organization in Chicago. So we want to see the grants they've made in Chicago, right? And we'll want to see the grants they've made in arts and culture to get an idea of what grant we could ask them for, you know, depending on what they've done in the past. So let's see here. So now we're down to 1,400. It's pretty good. And we want to cone this in a little bit. We want to see what grants they've made since 2015 in this subject area to get an idea if they really would be a funder that has made grants that would be for projects similar to ours or that would meet our needs. 380. So that's not bad. And then let's say we're looking for a $5,000 plus grant, right? See here. All right, so they've made 308 grants of 5,000 or more since 2015 in arts and culture, Chicago. So these could be grants that may be similar to grants we're looking for. So you would click View All here if you wanted to look at the grants list, and you could end up sending it to yourself in the same way. So you can send 100 at a time, just this list view that you see here. Or if we click on one of these grants, let's just open it in a new window, and you can take a look at what the grant detail looks like. Or you can save 10 at a time this grant detail. So it'll show you, sometimes there's a description here, sometimes there isn't, what it was for, how much it was. And so depending on what information you're looking for, that may be helpful. Another thing you can save is 100 at a time as a CSV, and you would have to download that at our library, and then you could attach that into an email to yourself or use a USB or whatever works for you. The nice thing about the CSV is you do get a little bit more information about subject area usually, and you would still get the description if there was one. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. So those are the basics of Foundation Directory Online. I hope this was helpful. Please feel free to reach out to the library at any point if you have any questions. Again, my name is Zoe. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.